Hello weirdos, welcome back to my channel, and today we are talking about the stuff that I read in the month of July. And we also have our baby. She's right here. But I'm gonna make sure to take her collar off. Also, if you hear a noise in the background, that's because I have a fan going because it's too hot. It's gotten better, but it's still too hot to just not have something going. So here's the baby. There's her thing. So yeah, I'm gonna do it this way. I'm gonna do it a little bit differently today, so that maybe you can see her. How are you doing? Do you go back there? Do you go back? Do you go in there? Yeah, there you go. You're cute. Yeah, are you sleeping? I'm going to bed soon. It's kind of late. Okay, so I read 19 books in the month of, I was going to say May, and I was like, no, July, which has been the record. It's been the most books that I have read this year. I don't know quite how to feel about that. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, or if I'm just really lonely. So let's talk about the first book that I finished, which is War of the Whales. This is by Joshua Horowitz, and this tells a story about whales and sonar. So basically there was this event where there was some the Navy was doing some solar testing. There were like 20 beached whales in this very small area of the Caribbean. Basically this story tells basically about this like war on sonar and how sonar is not good for marine life at all. I had no idea that any of this was happening. It felt very much like one of those things where the powers that be who are doing this research knew that what they were doing was harming the whales, and they just didn't give a shit. And there's this one point when they're in the trials, and there's this one scientist talking who is conducting research about trying to measure global warming. Long story. But he was really frustrated because people were trying to limit how much of these sonar waves he's putting into the water. And he just got really frustrated on trial and said, well, the Navy is putting out 10 times as much as I am right off the coast. And he wasn't supposed to say that. And I don't know, there were just things like that that were fun and cool. And I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was a really quick read. Yes, just about something that I didn't know about before. And it was just interesting. The second book that I finished is These Violent Delights. This is by Chloe Gong. And this is like a Romeo and Juliet retelling, but in with gangs in Shanghai, and one gang is a Chinese gang and the other gang is a Russian gang. That's where it is. I liked it, but I feel like the Romeo and Juliet aspects were kind of not really necessary. I feel like the author was doing certain things to adhere to that narrative that weren't really necessary. Some people criticize this and say that they didn't buy that the sacrifices they were making for one another. I was fine with it. I thought it was, I liked the romance bit of this piece, but maybe that's just because I understand the feeling of wanting to sacrifice and to protect your partner, even if the person that you're protecting them from is you. By that, I mean, I'm totally on the angst train for that. I love it. Another added complication to this is the addition of these bugs that are infesting the city. I thought that was a really cool addition. So it's not only just this romance plot between the two, it's an investigation. They're trying to figure out who is causing these bugs, these critters, and basically this infestation. And there are rumblings of unrest in Shanghai and in China in total because it's set in the 20s. I don't really want to talk too much more about this because I have more thoughts for the second book, which I did also read this month, so we're gonna talk about it later. So I thought this was a very good setup. I liked it. Yeah, I just didn't think that the whole Romeo and Juliet bit was necessary. I mean, I liked the rival gangs things, but I think that if this just wasn't as branded as much as a gangs, Chinese gangsters, Romeo and Juliet, I think it would have freed up the author to do a little bit more things and make it a little bit more of her own story. Moving on to the next book that I read, and that is Oryx and Crake. This is by Margaret Atwood, and this is the first book in the Mad Adam series. So the premise for this is that we're following this man, Snowman, whose name's also Jimmy, and he has been tasked by his friends, Oryx and Crake, to take care of the children of Crake, who are not humans. They're humanoid, but they're this weird combination, gender-spliced monstrosity that, well, monstrosity is not the correct word, but they're not humanoid, but they're mixed of all these different genes. And Crake created them because he thought humanity was terrible, and he wanted to create basically a better version of humanity, which he thought the answer to that was the children of Crake. So Jimmy / the Snowman, which is what the children of Crake call him, is taking care of these, humanoids, has to go on a journey. I forget exactly why he decides to leave, but I think he needed specific supplies that he couldn't get from around. But he's also just sort of in this existential crisis of grieving the loss of both Oryx and Crake, but really heavily Oryx, because he was in love with Oryx. And he's also just kind of going slightly crazy throughout the entire book because he thinks he's the only human left. And throughout the book, you get flashbacks as to what happened in the world, and what the world was like pre sort of apocalypse pandemic. That being said, there were many aspects of this book that made me highly uncomfortable, especially when it came to the character of Oryx. There was a lot of she was basically exploited from the point of when she was a very, very young child in a sexual manner. And that was really uncomfortable to read, because it doesn't get super explicit, but there's more details than I would like. And I understand, it's not necessarily a ding on the book, it just made me deeply uncomfortable to read. It's intentional, it's meant to be there for a reason. It's there's a reason that it's there. It's not just done there, it's not just done it to add color or flavor. It's meant to show the level of depravity that the world kind of has come to, and selfishness. Yeah, so I really enjoyed this. This is the first in the series, and I did finish the rest of the series this month, so we are going to hear my thoughts about the other books. So I thought this was a solid start, really solid world building and stuff like that, but just know that there could be potentially seriously triggering things in this book that might make you want to put it down, but stick with it, maybe skip over some of those parts, because the rest of the series I will talk about when we actually get to them. The next book that I read did not have an audiobook, and that is The Long Pursuit by Roy Morris Jr. This is Abraham Lincoln's 30-year struggle with Stephen Douglas for the heart and soul of America. It's just what it says on the tin. I mean, I thought it was fine. It wasn't anything super spectacular or revolutionary to read. One thing I didn't know was that Douglas died before Lincoln. I learned some more things about Douglas, but yeah, I mean, if you are interested in Civil War history and specifically the relationship between Lincoln and Douglas, it'll be great. The Lincoln-Douglas debates are in there, but that is not the primary focus of this book. It's really more about the relationship between these two men throughout their time in Springfield and beyond. In that way, the Lincoln-Douglas debates were a couple of chapters instead of the main thing. I thought they were going to be a little bit more important, but they weren't. So that's I thought it was fine. It's, not a terrible book, not an amazing book, but yeah, not a lot there to say on that one. Whoops. The next book that I read is Ruin and Rising. This is by Leigh Bardugo. That is the third book in the Shadow and Bone series. We're gonna go with calling it that. There's just a pet peeve of mine that happens in this book that it just happened to me more than once this month reading books, and I was just not happy. And that is when you kill a character, but then you don't actually kill a character. Dude, just Like, let that character die and let the other characters grieve the other characters. I know you have there's this impulse of having the character be alive and then, like, they can have a happy ending. Maybe it's just that this is specifically for a young adult audience, and that maybe might be too much for a young adult audience. In the real world, people fucking die and they don't come back. Young adults, people that this book is specifically marketed for and for, deal with that. To say that they don't is fucking stupid, and you're stupid for saying that, because the amount of people that died in my life before the age of 18 was just a lot. I know from firsthand experience that's something that, like, I fucking deal with, and a lot of other people deal with, and it's, in my opinion, that's just a lame excuse and not a good excuse for why we shouldn't have death in these books. But I understand, like, narratively, like, you want that happy ending. I don't know, I just think that having a character death is just very powerful, and it removes the tension between the characters, and specifically in this book. I'm not going to say who died, who didn't, but there's the tension between the two, because one of them is, like, willing to sacrifice himself and is like, yes, please use me, and the other is refusing to do that. And yeah, I mean, I kind of feel the same way like about this book that I felt about the other ones. It just kind of felt like that to me. I was like, okay, this isn't, like, amazing drop right, like, it isn't amazing, it's not, like, earth-shattering in terms of its greatness, but it's just, you know, fine. Maybe it's just because I've kind of grown out of series like this. So, I mean, in terms of a conclusion to the story, I thought it was a fine conclusion, with the exception of my, you know, rant there, basically. I'm trying to think of if I had any other thoughts about this book while I was reading it. I do like some of the twists at the end, the twist of what the third amplifier actually is. I thought that to be interesting. I don't want to say much more about that, even though this book is kind of old and fairly popular. Just don't want to spoil things for you. So that's that one. The next book that I read is Where the Mountain Meets the Moon. This is by Grace Lynn. And I like enjoyed this for, like, what it was. You know, this is for middle grade audience. Kind of have to, like, not necessarily, like, forgive it, but, you know, it's not written for me in mind, and so it is written in a very, like, simplistic storybook like way. But that's kind of the point, because it is meant to feel like a ongoing journey and saga, and it's supposed to mimic a lot of, like, Chinese folk tales that you're learning about. Well, you're not necessarily learning specific Chinese folktales. You're learning folktales that are specific for, like, this journey, that function as folktales in the world, if that makes any sense. And it very much operates like that. Like, you don't know all the folktales right away. The folktales come up as they become narratively relevant in this story. So this story is about a young girl. I think her name is Min Lee. I was right, it is Min Lee. She is a young girl. I forget her exact age, but I think she's, like, under 10. And she is growing up in this family and with her mom and her father, and they are struggling. They are scraping the bottom of their rice pot in order to make sure they get all the little grains of rice. Like, they are kind of, like, living paycheck to paycheck, except that's not really, like, a thing in this world. So she goes off on a journey to try and change her family's fortune. So she is on this journey, this quest, and along the way she meets, like, this dragon that's pictured, and she meets a bunch of other people, and she learns a lot of lessons, mainly through, like, these folktales. So what I'm meaning by these, like, folktales, in-world folktales come up as, like, she meets some people, is that, you know, when, you know, she meets the dragon, it will be like a story of, like, dragon's name or something like that. You'll get more details, and as you go on and as you read more of the folktales and you're learning more of the folktales, and as Min Lee journeys on, it all starts coming together and you're able to see a larger picture, because a lot of the folktales are connecting together to tell a bigger story of, like, kind of the past and a little bit about the future. And I quite enjoyed it. It is a very quick read. I think the whole thing took, like, maybe 2 hours. I enjoyed it, and I've had a lot of fun with it. I read it because it was, like, a book that was in the summer reading for my local library, and I was like, I've seen this book before. It looks kind of interesting. I don't think I understood before that it was for middle grade, But I think it's really good for what it is. It's really good. It is House, and this is a Cerulean Sea. This is by TJ Klune. This is the first TJ Klune that I read. And, I cried. I love this book. It is so freaking cute. I really like, the thing that says by V.E. Schwab. It says it's like being wrapped up in a big gay blanket. And I was like, yes, this is the kind of shit that I needed. Like, there's a sprinkling of angst. That I really enjoyed. What you doing? What you doing there? You stretching? You stretchy girl. Okay, goodbye. You come here? I loved it. So what is it about? It is about this man who works in basically child protective services, except it's like the registry for like magical children. He is sent by his boss. He's the kind of person that is like towing the company line. If you have ever seen How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying, he is like the epitome of like the company way guy, if that makes any sense. He very much like just follows exactly what the company says, and if it's in their manual, then he does it. So he is sent by extremely upper management to go to this island to live with this family. I think not family, but he is sent to live in this orphanage where there are 6 children who are kind of viewed as like dangerous, more dangerous so than the other magical children. What I really like is that each of the kids had a moment with the main character. What's his name? Linus Baker. So they all had a moment with Baker where they really could bond, and it really wasn't just a story of the 2 gay people coming and falling in love with each other. It was really like a story of Linus Baker changing and falling not only in love with this other person, but the children themselves. And I thought that was such an important piece of this story that if you didn't have that, I would not have cried. And you can just tell that there is so much love for the kids on like the Mr. Baker's part and Arthur, who is the orphanage manager person. And I will say, I called it. I called the thing on Arthur. I was sitting there, I turned over to my dad and I was like, this dude's fishy. There's something up with him. And I was right. I wasn't right in like exactly what the thing was, but I was like in the ballpark, and so I don't want to like spoil much for you because I think it's really cute and it's a very, very simple story, but I think it is very, very effective in what it does and pulling at your heartstrings. This, like, I finished it and I was like, this hands down is probably going to be one of the best books that I read this year, and that's just how I feel. It was just so freaking good. I loved it. And I'm really excited to read TJ Klune's other book, because if I've heard good things about that one, and if it's any good as like this one, then yeah. I think the other one's gay too, so I was really happy that there's some gay fucking literature. The next book that I read is Reading Lolita in Tehran. This is by Azar Nafisi. And this one I kind of like struggled with a bit because it talks about all of these different authors, like 4 main authors, and I haven't read their body of work, so it's a little bit hard to understand the connections that the author is making without like being so deeply in love with these works and these authors as Azar is. This is what it says. It's a memoir in books. So the author is telling her experience like moving back to Tehran after leaving for many years. What? Come here. Come here. Come here. Yeah, you do. You want to be cute, because you are always cute. Yes, you are. And she's a teacher. She's a university professor of literature. Once stuff starts really getting bad with the Taliban and stuff like that, she basically has this class outside that's very exclusive. She invites like 8 girls to participate in this class where they sit and talk about literature. Sounds super fun. I think so. They connect things that are happening in their own lives and how they see the world around them changing to things that this book talks about. And it's essentially just a series of discussions. And I mean, I like the idea And I don't think there's anything wrong with the execution. I just think that for me, it doesn't super work because I don't know, like, these texts and these characters that are mentioned in, like, these authors' works, as well as the author obviously does. So I'll tell you who the 4 authors are. So the first one is just a book. It's Nabokov's Lolita. And more than just Lolita is talked about. And then there's Gatsby, so F. Scott Fitzgerald, which I really only know Gatsby. And then there's James. Not really sure what James you're talking. I wasn't really sure what James specifically they were talking about. And then there was Jane Austen, who is the author I'm the most familiar with. So it was a little bit better in, like, that last section where she was talking about Austen. I think if you know those authors' books really well and you've read all of them and you really connect with those things, you'll get this book. It wasn't fully there for me. Yeah. There's that one. What do you think? She just wants pets. She's like, you've been ignoring me. You've been filming this video. You've been ignoring me. Pet me, pet me. That's how she feels. Okay, the next book that I read is Beast and Beauty. This is by Soman Chiani. I really enjoyed this. This is Twisted Fairy Tales. I love a good Twisted Fairy Tales. And I will always... You're gonna fall over. Don't fall over. I love a good Twisted Fairy Tale. Do you want me to hold you? Do you want me to hold you? Okay, I'll hold you. So I love a good Twisted Fairy Tale. And I think these are done really well because I think they are the stories are reimagined in fun ways, sometimes in gay ways. Oh, don't fall. Don't fall. Here, put you back. Sometimes in gay ways, which I loved. Like, I really loved the Sleeping Beauty bit. And sometimes in violent ways. I really liked it. I thought it was really fun and imaginative, and there's a bunch of, like, art in this as well that I think just works really well. And I think this is specifically for middle grade, and this I read because it was, like, my choice for, like, the middle grade section. And I just thought it was really good at what it did, and I really liked it. It's not gonna be for everyone. You gotta like Twisted Fairy Tales, and I like Twisted Fairy Tales. So it just hit the spot for me. It was great. The next book that I read is The Year of the Flood. This is by Margaret Atwood. This is the second book in the Mad Adam trilogy. I read this because why I picked this whole series up in the first place was because some of my students are going to have to read this. I liked this book a lot more than the first book. Because just sometimes I felt like Jimmy as a character was really, really difficult to understand because he just had this, he's a man, and he just had this very man way of thinking about things and kind of using women as objects. And this is in the perspective between two women. So it's alternating perspectives, and it does a lot of jumping between the past and the present. Kind of like the first one, Oryx and Crake. And there's this one character, Toby. When the world ends, she's stuck in a spa. She's like kind of like a little bit of a survivalist, but not really like a religious survivalist. She's just trying to stay away from humans and think about where she is going to find enough nutrition to survive. She does a lot of reflecting on her past. So you have the other character of Ren, who is, when the world ended, she was in a strip club, kind of, and she was like an exotic dancer, and so she is kind of trying to do the same thing as Toby, which is just survive, get to the next day. And she's also doing a lot of reflecting on their past, and they actually know each other, and they're not like super close, they're not like best friends, they kind of have like a mentor-mentee relationship, because Toby is older than Ren. They were in a cult called the Gardeners, and the Gardeners kind of have a really, really interesting like belief system. I really like, they're very much for, they're a strange mix of Christianity and science. I know, not Christian Science. One thing I thought that was really cool, so in this book was they'll have like hymns that the gardeners say. So there's this one, Peach or the Plum, and they'll have the text of the hymn, but in the audiobook, they actually hired somebody to write them as songs. And they're like not terrible either. And I'm like, could I get myself a playlist of these songs? Cause like, they're not like amazing, but like, they're not terrible either. I was enjoying them. So in this, what I really liked when I was reading this is that you're getting a lot of connections between the first book and the second book, and you're connecting Ren and Toby to Jimmy, the snowman, and the wider context and like what was happening from not like a person who was heavily involved in the end of the world, from like everyday people's perspectives, and you're getting this understanding of the gardeners and how are the gardeners fitting into everything, because they tend to have a lot to do. I really enjoyed this a lot. What are you doing? Come here. Come here. Weirdo. Yeah, just relax. Relax. So that was that one. The next book that I read is Returning to Reims. This is by Deirdre Urban. This talks a lot about the author's personal experience with... No, what? She, like, is unhappy sitting anywhere. I don't know how many books that the author has done, but this felt very much like a follow-up to an earlier book that he wrote, specifically about his relationship growing up in Reims with his father and his parents, just the whole town, as a young gay Frenchman, and how difficult that was and the amount of judgment that was put on him. So this is kind of him coming back after his father died, and him discussing kind of like class stratification, because apparently Reims is not very affluent area, or at least he grew up like didn't have a lot of money. They were like living paycheck to paycheck. And he kind of was able to pull himself up out of that and is like a scholar, basically. What? Come here. Come here. Yeah, so it was a very quick read. You can fly through this because the pages are just kind of very like sparsely populated with words. And this does not have an audiobook, and it is translated. And I don't know what about this, but it just did not work for me. I mean, I don't think I hated it, but it just wasn't like something that I necessarily like recommend. I did feel like I kind of needed that other book to better understand this book, because he talks about like his relationship with his father based on his sexuality, and I'm like, I have no context for this. I don't know what your relationship with your father is. Come here. You just like launched yourself at me. What is up with you? The next book I read was Me, Moth by Amber McBride. This is a poetry book, and this was my choice for the Goodreads Choice Awards. This was really, really interesting. There's a twist that I'm not going to talk about that I did not see coming, and I was just jaw dropped. And so you have this girl, and she's like a teenager. She feels very isolated because she just went through an extremely traumatic car crash that killed like the members of her immediate family, and she was the only survivor. So she is adjusting back to life and trying to reintegrate to society, and is really struggling because she is a young Black woman as well. And it's all just like, she's not doing great mental health wise. She's not doing well friendship wise until she meets this boy, this young man, who is kind of dealing with like similar emotions of just isolation because he's Native American with not a ton of other Native Americans. He feels very much of an outcast within his own family. So they meet together and they form like a friendship. And there is a lot of, I don't know if like a lot is the right word, but there's definitely a lot of talk about like religious practices and like mysticism, specifically from like the Native American angle, and I think it's like, I'm gonna get it wrong, but like it's not voodoo, it's like I think hoodoo or something like that, but it's like African American like spiritualism it was interesting. It's an interesting aspect to the book, and I enjoyed it. And dude, that twist, man, did not see that coming at all. We have entered the sequel era, which of this month, which is basically when I was just trying to get through books that I had bought that were sequels, continuations of other books. So the rest of this video is going to be a little bit hard to watch if you haven't read the first books to a lot of these series. So the next book is Girls of Storm and Shadow. This is by Natasha Gang, and this is a continuation from the Girls of Paper and Fire. We're dealing in the same world where there's 3 types of humanoids. You've got humans who are paper cast. You have a mix of human and demon. That is steel class. And then you have just full out demons. It's not demons Judeo-Christian way, okay? But they're basically just like humanoid animals. And so that's Mooncast. And so you're following up with the main character who is in her lovely relationship with her lesbian lover who can do magic, which becomes thematically relevant. And they are trying to gather people to basically rebel against leading the like king, except they think that the king is dead, but they're just trying to topple down the regime. And because of the regime's like subjugation and exploitation of both paper and steel casts, loyalties are tested, boundaries are pushed, things are revealed in this one that I was not expecting. People die and they stay dead. Actually, when they are under the impression that they have successfully murdered like the king, we knew that by the ending of the first book that he was not successfully murdered. So that's not really like a thing that I was complaining about. Yeah, I enjoyed this one. I'm excited for the third one. I think I liked the first book a little bit more. I thought this was still a good entry. And it still makes me excited to continue on with the series and finish the series. Come here. Being a gymnast. That's what you're doing. You weirdo. The next book that I read is Scum Villains Self-Saving System Volume 2. This is by MXTX. And I enjoyed this. I don't think I liked it as much as the first one of this series, but I think it's a solid entry in the second volume, which after this book we are halfway through the series. So stuff is moving. We got kids, which was exciting. I don't this was just so hard to explain plot-wise, but basically at the beginning of this story, of this volume, we know that Luo Binghe is back. Shen Qingqiu, not handling it well, literally jumps out a fucking window. Hilarious. Lots of stuff happens that winds up with the death of Shen Qingqiu, and through his death, Shen Qingqiu learns a lot about himself and his relationship with Luo Binghe that starts changing his perspectives. Because holy fucking crap, like, Shen Qingqiu, I'm sorry, you dumbass. Like, come on, you're so gay and so is Luo Binghe. Get your act fucking together. I think that's all I'm gonna say about this one. Because it's kind of hard to talk more in specifics unless you read the first one. That's just the nature of these volumes. Next one, another sequel. Wow, surprised. No, we're not. And that is Lore Olympus Volume 2. I got this month. And, yeah, I like Lore Olympus. I think it's a good webtoon. And have I been keeping up? No, I am woefully behind. Like I'm probably on, like, episode 100, and there's, like, 200 episodes out. But this covers episode 26 to 49. So we're going in about 25 episode chunks. Which is a little bit like mind-boggling to me because I'm just seeing my future self just be full of just Lore Olympus stuff because I am going to be buying all of these books. Have I gone back to try and catch up? Like, yes and no. It's so exhausting to try and keep up with all of these serialized things because there are so many. That's why I just prefer books because you can get just a giant chunk, but I do have to wait a while for the next volume of this to come out. Do I talk about the plot of this? Maybe, but this is a Hades and Persephone retelling. Need you know more. It's hard to talk about this without kind of going into spoilers, but basically Apollo is still being an ass, because of course he is. Hera has an inkling that something is up. Hades needs to get his act together and actually end his relationship with Minty. Persephone needs to sort out herself. She is starting to build relationships and friendships, like, at school, so that's good. But she needs to sort out what exactly are her feelings for Hades. Minty, I feel for you, bitch, but, like, what you did to Persephone was not cool. I think that's all my feelings. I have more feelings, but, like, that's all for now. It's too complicated to talk about. Okay, the next book that I read is Leave the World Behind. This is by Ruamand Alam. And I knew nothing about this going in. But basically, you have a family. They're on vacation. They're just trying to chillax and relax. And then they get a knock on their vacation home's door, which they're renting from this wealthy family. Who shows up at the door? The family. The wealthy family they're renting this house from. They're like, hey, something weird's going on in, like, New York. Downtown New York. So we, like, there was blackout. So we just thought it would be okay for, like, us to stay the night here as well. And it's, like, a pretty big place. They have, there's a house, and then there's, like, an in-law suite. So it's a big house. And so they reluctantly agree, and then weird shit just keeps happening. And I don't know how quite to describe my feelings towards this book, because the whole time I was just like, this is weird. I'm like, this is odd. I don't know how to feel about this, just because it's just weird feelings. They're not bad feelings. It's just a lot of kind of like, what the fuck? Because stuff happens and then it's like never brought up again. Like, there's a bunch of deer that just show up and then leave. And then there's a bunch of flamingos that do the same thing. Then there's a crying girl on the street. And it's just, like, I feel like, I think this is not meant to be a book that gives you a lot of answers. It's meant for you to just kind of, like, question, like, your life. Like, is the world that we're living with in, like, good? Like, do we just need to, like, disconnect from, like, the real world a little bit more and, like, be a little bit more present? And that way, this book felt kind of pretentious to me. It's definitely not a book for me. I don't know if I'd ever pick up something that the author wrote again. It was definitely interesting. I read this because, again, some of my students do have to read this. I think it's for, like, their humans in nature class. Interesting choice. I mean, for a while, like, a good halfway through the book, I didn't understand why it was chosen for, like, humans in nature. But then by the end, I kind of got it. It just felt, it was weird. It was weird. It was a weird book. That's all I'm going to say about it. The next book, we have The Second Rebel. This is by Lyndon A. Lewis. This is the second book in the First Sister series. And this book fucking did me dirty. Those last two chapters with those knowledge bombs, like, bitch, what? You're just gonna leave it there? You're just going to leave it there. You know how I said about, like, characters dying, right? This one is probably one of the one things that I think it could get away with it, given the circumstances surrounding the death and given where it ended. In terms of, like, the last chapter, I don't want to give any spoilers, but it is conceivable to me that they could bring some version of this character back, which is exciting to me because I like the character. I was sad to see him go, and I was sad to see people grieve. It's hard to talk about the plot of this book because all I can think about is how badly I want to pick up the next book, because last two chapters, what made me mad, not mad, but just like I was like, oh my god, I have to read more, and I have to wait. I'm not happy about having to wait. I don't even know how long, but let's just say 6 months for shits and giggles. That's not fun. But you basically, it's kind of the vibes of, like, the first book, where you are having this, like, revolution, and it's, you know, people bubbling up through the streets. It's the people who are abused and routinely used. Basically, like, live experimentations, who are really gearing up to rebel, and they are finding ways to do it. And again, we're focusing on our two different societies. One super pro technology and, like, changing things. the other super anti, but is kind of very hypocritical. So you have the motherhood that is a religious order within the anti-religious place, and you have this one character that you're following in there that you think is going to be geared up to be the mother, and shit happens and that does not happen, and I'm very curious to happen where she goes, and you learn more about the motherhood and more about other, like, characters who are sisters in this, like, motherhood thing, which I felt like was kind of lacking in the first one. But in the first one, we had 3 characters we're following. This one, we're having 4. One of the characters we're following still is that person from the other order, and then the anti-technology, like, world, and then you have 3 people who are from the, like, pro-technology place. But they're all kind of, like, spread out and doing different things. So one of them is a non-binary person, which I really appreciated, who's going out trying to figure out what is going on with this, like, intelligence. Yeah, it's like a digital person, if that makes any sense. Because we're learning more about this third area of people that aren't really people. It's exciting. I want to know more about that place. And we, I think, in the third one are going to get a lot more about it, given how this book ended. I'm sorry. A lot of this is just my brain belting about the ending to this book. Yeah. So then you have another character who's like the spider person who is, you know, trying to fight against, like physically fighting against people. And his sister is on Venus, actually, where the society where people are pro-technology live, and she is trying to work from within the system. And in this book, you see her go flip to her brother's side through no direct influence, really, from her brother, which is really interesting. So, yeah, those are the kind of 4 stories that we're following. So it's a lot. It drags a little bit in the middle, but stick through it. The ending. Those last, like, 5 pages. Damn. Damn. This is why I believe in finishing things. Because maybe those last 5 pages, who knows? Do you want to come up? Come up. What is up with you? What is up with you? What's up with you? Do you need attention? Do you need attention? So badly. So desperately, you need attention. Okay. The next book... Jesus, she's not happy. The next book is... Oh, God. The next book is Are Violent Ends, which is the sequel to These Violent Delights. This is also by Chloe Gong. A lot more moving pieces are happening in this book. So we get more gayness, which I'm super happy of. We get a hint of it in the last one, but we get a lot more in this. That made me happy. I'm always happy when there's gay shit that are happening in books. I feel like this one kind of loses the mystery thread a little bit more for good reasons and for an intentional reason, because we have the incoming, like, communist revolution that's sweeping through Shanghai. And that becomes like a fever pitch. And what I kind of liked about the setup to the second book is that it's kind of simmering in the first book, and then this one, it just boils. It goes, like, from simmering to boiling, and it just derails a lot of what is happening in this. And this, again, does the character dies but doesn't die. And I was just over it. It wasn't a super, like, they're alive, but it was heavily implied. And I was just like, ugh. I was so annoyed by that personally, but I was like, if we just ignore the epilogue, I'm fine with the ending to this. Yeah, I liked we're getting a focus on more of the side characters in this one. I really do like that they have this. So, again, with these bugs, we learned that there are, like, 5 more of these super bugs that can create all of these, like, little bugs that could basically destroy Shanghai. And the person who has these bugs are blackmailing the gangs, basically saying, pay me or I'm going to release these bugs and basically destroy Shanghai. And a lot of that starts crumbling down because the bugs get released anyway. So you have these workers who are like, what the fuck, gangs of Shanghai? We thought you were going to protect us. You're not protecting us. Guess who is trying to protect us? The communists. And I just thought that was interesting. That I like this is my thing with this series. I like the ideas that are going into it. I like all of the political intrigue that is happening. I just feel like it's hampered and it's weighed down by the Romeo and Juliet aspect. I felt like Chloe Gong had a story that she wanted to tell. Maybe it might have started off as Romeo and Juliet fanfiction, but has kind of derived so much that it's not necessary to tell a good story. And when you're shoehorning things like the names and the characters, like it's like the Montakovs and the Sais, and it's Roma and like Juliet, and except it's Jun Lee. I just felt like if she'd just written her own story and didn't try to shoehorn in all this other stuff, for me, I think it would have just worked a little bit better. Sure, you might have gotten comparisons to Romeo and Juliet. Like, that's okay. Like, it's really doing its own thing. And I like that it's doing its own thing. I felt like the rivalry between the two families actually feel real rather than the nonsense that it is in Romeo and Juliet. And I like you have this, like, other greater looming threat of, like, basically the communists. And it's not a bad series. It's a good series. But, like, it just felt like a little bit unnecessary, in my opinion. So, there you go. The specific Romeo and Juliet aspect, shoehorning that in. Okay, last book. This has been fucking long. This is, oh my god, this is like almost an hour. Jesus. Last book. And big surprise. Is it a sequel / continuation of the series? Yes. And that is Mad Adam. This is the last book in the Mad Adam trilogy. In this, you are learning a lot more about Zeb, who was a leader in the Gardeners. What I like about this one is that you do have flashbacks to stuff that's happening. It's not as integral and as necessary as it is in the first two books. Because this you're just learning about Zeb and his relationship with his half-brother Adam, who is Adam 1, who is like the leader of the Gardeners. I felt like it was a little bit disappointing what happens to him. You get a lot more of society moving on and growing and maturing in this, and you get perspectives. It's constantly changing perspectives. And what threw me off a little bit is that the audiobook narrators change, and they don't always make it super obvious when the perspective is changing, if that makes any sense. That probably doesn't. But anyway, I thought it was a solid ending. I thought it wasn't as, like, doomsday as it could be. And this is a lot more focused on preserving, like, what they have, what they found at the end of the first book, and, like, growing it slowly and taking care of different threats. This doesn't pull off the people die at the end, but they don't actually die. So I like that. And yeah, you have all the characters, like, in one place, and they're trying to rebuild society, and make a better society than it was before, with the integration of the children of Craig, which I think was a really interesting aspect, because guess what? The children of Craig can speak to animals. It's pretty cool. So, I mean, as a total, how I felt like about the whole series was, I thought it was really good. I'm thinking my favorite in the series is the second. Solid work by Margaret Atwood. I totally understand why they made these kids, like, why they made the kids read about it, because basically how the world ends is a pandemic. It's thought-provoking, and it's a good discussion piece. I think that's it. I'm very tired. I did not expect this video to be as long as it fucking was, but it is. I thought I was going to be able to film another video today, but that's clearly not possible. That's not happening. I'm going to leave you there. I'm going to grab the baby, or not. Oh, haha, caught your butt. I caught your butt. You want to say bye to these nice people? Why are you so, like, squirmy right now? Why are you so like that? Do you want to just run around? Do you just have, like, nervous energy? Oh my god. You don't like being held like that. You're a little baby. Do you want to say bye-bye to the nice people? You want to say bye-bye? Bye-bye. God. What the freak? Leave, like, a running emoji, because she's been running everywhere in this video. In the comments down below. Okay. Bye-bye.